And we're going to be in John chapter 4 and John chapter 5 this morning, but we'll start with John chapter 4 and verse 43. And we're going to look at two accounts of Jesus healing someone in the Gospel of John. In fact, I think in total, Jesus heals 3 people in the Gospel of John. And they're very pointed right there for certain reasons, and we'll get into that as we go. But the main question that we ask about these texts about Jesus healing these 2 individuals is we get to look and a glimpse into what does it mean to live by faith. What does living by faith mean? What does faithfulness look like? And like in the rest of the Gospel of John so far, we keep seeing contrasts between people and between unlikely people. And again, we're going to see a contrast between 2 people that receive a healing from Jesus and how they respond to that and the circumstances that led them there and their circumstances afterwards. And we get to peek in to start seeing what John is telling us, what faithfulness looks like, what having faith looks like. And so let's begin in John chapter 4, starting in verse 43. It says, "After the 2 days he left for Galilee. Now Jesus himself had pointed out that a prophet has no honor in his own country. And when he arrived in Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him. They had seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, for they also had been there. And once more he visited Cana in Galilee, where he had turned water into wine. And there was a certain royal official whose son lay sick at Capernaum. When the man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him and begged him to come and heal his son, who was close to death. 'Unless you people see miraculous signs and wonders,' Jesus told him, 'you will never believe.' The royal official said, 'Sir, come down before my child dies.' And Jesus replied, 'You may go, your son will live.' The man took Jesus at his word and departed. And while he was on his way, his servants met him with the news that the boy was living. And when he inquired as to the time when his son got better, they said to him, 'The fever left him yesterday at the 7th hour.' Then the father realized that this was the exact time at which Jesus had said to him, 'Your son will live.' So he and all his household believed. This was the second miraculous sign that Jesus performed, having come from Judea to Galilee. Sometime later, when Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now, this is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate of the pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethsaida, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. And when Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, 'Do you want to get well?' 'Sir,' the invalid replied, 'I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me.' Then Jesus said to him, 'Get up, pick up your mat, and walk.' At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. And the day on which this took place was the Sabbath. And the Jews said to the man who had been healed, 'It is the Sabbath, and the law forbids you to carry your mat.' But he replied, 'The man who made me well said to me, pick up your mat and walk.' So they asked him, 'Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?' And the man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, 'See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you.' The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well." So 2 interesting stories, very, very different in circumstances of what's happening here. But John begins to tell us like where Jesus is at, that he's going from left Galilee, he's going back into Canaan. that he's done this circle, and I've talked about this circle starting in Canaan, where he turned water into wine, and John is reminding us of that this is all happening in this thing. Let's see. My phone's doing something funny online. Okay, so all this is happening. That what he's done, and what John has shown us, what Jesus has done as he began his gospel, all the way back in chapter 1, starting in verse 10. Right, remember John saying this about Jesus: "He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet all who receive him, to those who believe in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor human decision or a husband's will, but born of God." And he goes into this and talks about the light, and what John has now shown us as he's gone through this grouping of people, the turning water and wine at the wedding feast, that Jesus is there present amongst his countrymen. As he goes and calls his disciples, there they are again, those who he's called to, and those that are believing, his fellow Jewish countrymen. He goes to the temple, and you see a contrast between those in the countryside believing in Jesus and seeing what he's doing and following him, to those in the terrible acts of things that are happening under the rule of the Pharisees in the temple. I mean, the Sadducees in the temple, and driving out those people. Then Nicodemus, the Pharisee, coming to him at night, and to the Samaritan, and now he's talking to a Gentile who has come to him. And so what we start seeing is exactly what John has been laying groundwork for, that Jesus is coming in to the world that he has created, and those that he has created of humanity. There's those that don't recognize who he is, and those who start seeing who he is. And remember what he says to Nicodemus as he talks in very most famous passages in Scripture, John 3:16, right? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, whoever believes in him shall have eternal life. We start seeing that this is not just for a small section of people, but he's gone to his fellow countrymen, the Jews. He's gone to the religious leaders of their time. He's gone to the Samaritans, who were their enemies in a sense, right? And he's gone to the Gentiles. He's like hit all the groups of people that would be in this classifications of how people were classified from this perspective. And Jesus is there going and preaching and receiving and bringing people back. And so we start really seeing this overview of Jesus' ministry, of who Jesus' gospel is for, that it truly is for everyone in the world. It's just not for a certain group of people. It's not just for certain people that just get it or we're waiting for it, but it's being offered to all. And so we start seeing this. When it goes to those questions, what does faithfulness look like? What does faith look like? How does someone live in faith? We start getting glimpses and seeing this, and how people are living in faith or not living in faith. Those that are struggling in their faith, those that are questioning, those that are accepting. We start seeing all that and what Jesus is doing and who he is interacting with. And he comes back, and there's this official from Capernaum whose son is sick. And so we start getting to see this guy who is not telling it is a believer. He's an official in Capernaum. In the other Gospels, it will give us a little more information about him. It says here a certain royal official. In the other Gospels, he's more connected to the government from Rome in this area. And so we start seeing like, okay, here's someone who doesn't give you the idea of someone who have faith in Jesus. Someone who is totally outside of all this, but he has heard about Jesus and he is seeking Jesus. You put yourself in the shoes of a parent whose child is deathly ill. That's what's going on here. And the desperation of that parent to find away so that their child can live. We have so many people going through that just now, right? Of children with COVID, children with leukemia, children with all these things, and desperately, what treatment, what doctor, what hospital? How can we save our child? And the fear drives parents, right, of their children. It's like there's fear now in COVID, fear of mask or don't mask, vaccine or don't vaccinate. Just all driving from different motivations. Why? Because people want to protect their children. And so there's this man coming from this idea. I've heard of Jesus because I've heard of these people he's healed and heard of these things. And we can say, like, well, what kind of faith does he have? What kind of religion has he practiced, right? He just has heard and said, you know what, I will get there and I will tell Jesus to come with me and he'll heal my child. But when he gets to Jesus, Jesus doesn't do what he asks. In a sense, he doesn't like, come and get me, all right, come and go with me. Jesus is like, hey, you guys are looking for a sign. You're never going to believe without a sign. And he says, you know what? Your son will live. Go home. He doesn't get to see it. Jesus doesn't come and lay hands and he gets to see all this that happens. He has to totally live within faith, living in the middle of faith, where so many of us are living now. This is I think one of a really realistic story within the Gospels of seeing how we live now with faith. Because we ask Jesus, hey, Jesus, we need this. Jesus, can you do this? Jesus, that. And Jesus kind of doesn't always just say, okay, here, I'll go with you and do this, right? The answer's not always clear. Most of the time, the answer's not clear. But just as this government official had to do, he lives in that moment of faith, having to come to Jesus in faith, like, this is my last resort to save my son. To now I just have to take Jesus' word on it and go back, not really knowing. And that's the journey that we are all on. Because we don't always see everything clearly. Everything's not always happening the way we think it needs to happen. And Jesus is saying, you know what? At the end, this will. These are my promises. These are the things I say to you. Now go and do. And so we're living in that moment. And fortunately, that all this stuff ended up working out. Here, for someone who's maybe not very religious, someone who hasn't attended synagogue or church or whatever all their lives, someone who really, coming from a Roman perspective, could be a pagan. And here Jesus is doing something because he is here to save everyone in the world. And he goes off. And his servants come and meet him back on that journey because a miracle has happened, right? The son, the fever is gone. He is well. And they come together and he's like, when did it happen? Well, at the seventh hour, and the seventh being perfection within this culture. Like, this is the perfect thing. This is the perfect thing that's happened. This is Jesus. And this rejoicing and going on that he has been healed. And we get to see the response that him and his servants and all his household believe. And we keep seeing this. Those that have this encounter with Jesus believe. Those that see what Jesus is doing believe. And so we start getting to see, what does faith look like? What does faith mean? What does faithfulness look like? And then the acting on that faith. You could have sat there and argue with Jesus. He could have gone and go, okay, I don't know. But we see him going and moving through life just as we do. Now we compare that with the guy in Jerusalem at the pool. And here we have another peculiar story. A peculiar story of how someone approaches faith. Here you can go to the pool at Bethsaida. It's still there. It's been archaeologically preserved, and you can see it. This is a real place, and this was a place where Jews would go and do their purification rituals of washing. And for some reason, it had gotten this reputation that if you got into the water, if you're blind, sick, lame, or had something else, like the first one in, right, you'd be touched by an angel or something and be healed. And so we see a man who is believing in some kind of superstition. A man who is believing in some kind of folk religion there. And Jesus comes up and says, hey, do you want to get well? He's like, well, I can never get into the water first. Everybody always beats me, and I'm just waiting for my miracle, kind of a thing. And he's waiting there. And Jesus is like, well, you want to get well? Get up and pick up your mat and walk. And instantly, right? Here again, someone who's like, well, what kind of faith do they have, right? And Jesus is doing something, just like with this other official. It really gets us to think about how faith works and how open one needs to be in seeing what Jesus is doing, that we can't be blind to it. Because once this man is healed, it says he picks up his mat and walks, and then the text lets us know this is on the Sabbath. And one of these Sabbath rules is you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, and this is seen as working. And so the officials say, hey, why are you walking with your mat, right? You're breaking the Sabbath, right? And that's punishable. We're going to write you a ticket, kind of a thing. And it's like, no, right? I don't, it's not me. The guy that healed me told me to go and do this, right? He throws Jesus under the bus. And I'm like, who is this guy? I don't know who did it, right? He throws him under the bus. He doesn't just like, oh, this wonderful thing happened to me. He's like, no, I'm afraid I'm going to get in trouble by the religious authorities for doing what I'm doing. He's just been healed. How long did it say he was lame? It's quite some time. That 38 years. 38 years. Waiting for something like this to happen, and it happens, and the one who does it, he throws him under the bus. You see a totally different response to what Jesus is doing in both of these. This is this contrast between those that respond and how they live out their faith. And Jesus finds him later, because he slips out in the crowd, and he finds him later in the temple, and he tells him this very odd statement. And in most of our English translations, it's going to read something like this: see, you are well again, stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. So the question is like, what worse? Is he going to be an invalid again? Is he going to be punished in some way? Like, what worse is Jesus going to do? Like, what is happening? And kind of the idea that Jesus is conveying to him, since he's been healed and been blessed by God, what have you done with it? What have you done with it? All you did is that's Jesus' fault, right? He hasn't done anything with faith going forward. Jesus has given him something, and he hasn't done anything with it but blame and point fingers. He says, what's going to be worse is what's going to happen to you because you're not going to live in faith. Ultimately, what's going to happen at the end? Because you're not seeing what God is doing in your own life, you don't have the right faith. Contrast this with the Greek official, the Roman official, the Gentile coming. So you see this contrast between someone who is in a religious context and someone who is out of that religious context. And how do they respond to Jesus? And it goes on because he doesn't get it. Because when he sees the Jewish officials, he says, okay, I got his name, right? It's Jesus. And then they go, okay, this guy's stirring trouble up for us on the Sabbath. And then verse 16, which we haven't read, says, so because Jesus was doing these things, healing invalid people on the Sabbath and telling them, get up and take your mat and go home, the Jews persecuted him. They started the persecution because this guy was able to point him out. It's that guy. This is the one who told me to go walk. And so as we put ourselves into these accounts, into these stories, what has Jesus done for us? How has Jesus moved and worked within us in our crippled, backwards at some times, lame understanding of the greatness of God? Has he shown up and he has given us salvation? As he's done thing after thing after thing for us, what are we doing? What are we doing? What does this faith mean to us? How are we living out in faithfulness to what Jesus has done for us, what Jesus is going to do for us, and what Jesus is doing now in each and every one of our lives? And that's the question that's being presented to us. It's like you look at this, you don't have to have this strong faith when you come, but once something has happened, as Jesus is giving you some kind of salvation, in the sense these healings, healing of a son and healing of this man, then what do you do with that? Do you go back home like the official and rejoice with the members of your household and believe? Are you still like, I'm still going to try to live within this constructive religious system that doesn't allow me to express and see and live out faith in Jesus? So those are the two things that are going on here. And the one that's going to try to live in this narrow religious system, Jesus says, something worse may happen to you. It's a warning to all of us. It can. It's a warning to us. It's to get us to think, and not just think, but to be in action. What are we going to do with the gifts that Jesus gives us? You know, Jesus will tell a parable, and it's the parable of the talents, right? And it talks about the master that entrusted his servants with various forms of money. It was called the talent, and one did things with it and got more back, and the other invested more with it and got a whole bunch back. But the one that was afraid to do anything buried it, right? He hid it. And when the master came back, the one's like, "Hey, you gave me this, and it's 100-fold. Here you go. You gave me this, and it 50-fold, right? And give it back." And the other was like, "Oh, I was afraid, even though I know you." Where you even reap where you don't sow. Like, you can produce things and things you don't have your hands in. Yet you're able to, but I was afraid and I hid it. And what does he do with it? He's like, "You worthless servant. At least you could have put it in the bank and give me interest." And he casts them out because he was given something and didn't do anything with it. And sometimes I feel that's how we approach our faith. We're given so much, and we don't do much with it. We've been blessed in so many ways, yet we're afraid and we won't do anything with it. We look at all we can do and say, "Well, you know what? But it's because we have this restriction on us, because we've always done it this way." We really can't change that or do that. Or it's because of this way, or it's because of this in the past, or it's this, and we've created this such narrow religious expression that we can't do the things that we need to do with the things that we've been blessed to do. And Jesus is warning us, something worse may happen to you. Because when he comes back, he's going to say, like, "Well, what did you do with the things I gave you? The salvation I gave you, the blessings I gave you, the opportunities I gave you." You say, "Well, we had it, we kept it safe, and here it is." He's going to go, this warning. It's coming towards us. And so I don't like it to be a downer, right? This is where the text is. But it's there a contrast to say, like, okay, you don't have to have all this stuff to bring in to be effective for Jesus. You just need to do what Jesus is giving you to do. Live out those portions of faith. And Jesus is going to provide. Jesus is going to do. Jesus is going to heal. Jesus is going to make that way and that path open for you and I, so that we can really see what is happening. We can see the miraculous that Jesus is performing. We can see and have faith and joy, and like everyone else in this gospel, say, check out Jesus, see what Jesus is doing. Check out Jesus, see what Jesus is doing. This is what the official did. That's not what the invalid man did at the pool of Bethsaida. And so we're given this contrast as, which one are you? Are you the official? Or are you the guy waiting at the pool, waiting for Jesus to do something? He does it, and you miss it. All right, the lesson is yours. Who you're going to be, which way you're going to go. And so, Ryan, you can lead us in our closing song.